you're looking to dive into topics on how to live a happier, healthier, more fit, and long lifespan, then you've come to the right podcast. Livin the Dream with me, Coach Damian Evans. Together, we will explore the topics on all things health, fitness, and wellness. Together, we will be lifelong learners on this journey to living the ultimate dream. What up, Dream Team? Coach D here coming at you from beautiful sunny San Diego. And in today's episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. A lot of you know that when we decided to make this podcast, the goal was to let us do all the dirty work when it comes to learning about all the things health, fitness, and wellness. The goal was to let us search through what all the experts are saying and let us do all the research. And then in turn, we then teach it to the Livin the Dream team. We teach what is most applicable and helpful to you. So today I'm going to touch on a few things that I learned this week while on the path to being a lifelong learner. Instead of a masterclass episode where I break down one topic with a nice deep dive, this is going to be more of a Cliff Notes version, highlights of what I've learned this week, and then I'll attach the source of what I learned, where the content came from, just in case you want to learn more. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how our environment, the things that we choose to surround ourselves with, the things that we may not have control over, how our environment shapes our health. Number two, we're going to talk about how making it harder on yourself to snack and harder for yourself to take those small sips, dips, licks, and tastes throughout the day can be extremely impactful to your weight management goals. We're going to teach you what the author of Atomic Habits, James Clear, what his philosophy is on the 4 laws of behavior change and how you can build and change habits into your own life, as well as share 3 ideas that he offered in his most recent newsletter that I thought we could really benefit from. And then lastly, I'm actually going to give you a rundown on 4 books that I just finished back to back to back. And these books include Salt, Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us by Michael Moss, which came out in 2013. And then he just came out with a sequel to that book called Hooked, Food, Free Will, and How the Food Giants Exploit Our Addictions. And that came out in 2021. So I read those back to back. And then also The Hungry Brain, Outsmarting the Instincts That Make Us Overeat by Dr. Stephen Guyenet. And then the last book was called The Way We Eat Now, How the Food Revolution Has Transformed Our Lives, Our Bodies, and Our World by B. Wilson. They all did a phenomenal job at breaking down the timeline of what happened with our food care systems, and corporations that really took advantage and kind of are still taking advantage of how addictive and reactive the emotional brain works. So if you're someone that struggles with the relationship between any kind of food or anything like that, I definitely recommend these books. But before we get to the topic of the day, I want to start by thanking the sponsor of this podcast. This podcast is brought to you by a new group that I started this year called the Accountability Club. I've worked at a gym pretty much my entire adult life, and every single new year, there tends to be some sort of weight loss challenge or biggest loser competition. I found, after watching more than a dozen of these type of programs, that it works really, really well for maybe like 5% of the people who enter it. They usually lose a ton of weight, and then a very small percentage actually maintains that weight loss, which is great for them. However, year after year, I hear the other 95% of the people that do these things, they tell me how disappointed in themselves that they are. They tell me that all the reasons why they didn't get their goals, why they fell off, why they failed. And it makes me sad because, in my opinion, it's much more about the program's fault than it is the person's. Trying to lose as much weight as possible in a short period of time is a recipe for disaster. We've known this for a long time when it comes to long-term sustainable results. So that's why I started this accountability club. We follow the 52 mini-sode episodes, one at a time, week after week. We set small attainable goals, and the club holds every single person accountable through public tracking, through a group thread where we can all communicate. And then I also sprinkled in a little bit of human psychology to get some skin in the game. Each person decides at what level they want to participate at, and there's a buy-in. Essentially, I'm betting them their money that they won't achieve their goals. And if they achieve their goals, they receive their money back and could even possibly win some months free at the gym that I own. If they do not achieve their goal, they have to keep paying the gym monthly dues until they do hit their goal. So you're essentially incentivized to go chase your goals, and you're kind of punished for not being able to do that. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, we will open up new room for new club members at the first of every month. So if it sounds like something that you'd like to do, message me and I can send you over more info on how to start. You don't have to even be at our gym. You don't have to be one of our gym members. You don't have to be here in San Diego. You can literally do it from anywhere. Thank you, Accountability Club, for sponsoring this episode. And this week's 5-star review comes from Naveed A23. Naveed says, "Such an easy to comprehend podcast. I love how it is designed to teach us about how to be healthy. I'm an undergraduate studying dietetics, and these episodes help expand the concepts that I'm learning in school. Thank you for all the work you put into making these." Oh, thank you so much, Naveed. That's awesome. I'm so happy that you're finding value in this podcast. If everyone else would do me a favor, if you haven't already, while you're listening to this episode, if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to subscribe to this podcast, which will allow you to get notifications anytime that I release an episode. But it also shows more people that this podcast is actually worth a listen. And then you can scroll down and leave me a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. I read every single one, and I appreciate the love and feedback. And now on to the topic of the day. So I was listening to an episode of The Doctor's Pharmacy with Dr. Mark Hyman, and he was interviewing Dan Buettner, who is an explorer, National Geographic Fellow, award-winning journalist, and producer and New York Times best-selling author. He actually discovered the things that we talk about all the time on this podcast. He discovered the 5 places in the world dubbed blue zones, where people live the longest, healthiest lives. And they were talking about how our environment, the things that we choose or may not choose to surround ourselves with, how our environment shapes our health. And Dan was saying that people in those blue zones have a lot of things in common. They tend to have a purpose. They know what they were meant to do when they wake up, and they don't stress much about it. They tend to have large family values or some type of group or community that supports them. They tend to have faith and a sacred daily ritual that allows them to unwind. Things like taking daily naps, meditation, prayer, or even happy hour. They usually have a close group of friends who they can count on when they're having a bad day, just to talk to. They can have meaningful conversations with them, and they reinforce the healthy decisions that they make. One more thing that Mr. Buettner was sure to touch on is that people that live in these blue zones, they don't have better willpower than those of us who don't live in blue zones. They don't have better discipline. They don't have better diet plans. They don't have better sense of healthy living and what that is. They literally just live their life. So he argues that if you're going to start on a journey to living as healthy for longevity as you can, one of the biggest levers that you can pull is not actually what we think here in the West. When we think of that kind of that journey, we think about diet and exercise. But he argues that you should start with your immediate environment. What's around you and who is around you will have the greatest impact if you're looking for overall health. And for me, the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear this is, I just recently took a trip back home to visit my dad's side of the family. And both my dad's side and my mom's side of the family were from very, very small towns. I'm talking like 4,000 people or 1,500 people. My dad's side lives about 45 minutes outside of Boise in a small town called New Plymouth. Shout out to New Plymouth, with only, I think he said 1,500 people that live there. When I arrived, he said, let's go get some groceries because we're going to be here for a few days and we just want to be able to have the food that we want in the house that we like. There's only 2 small stores in town, and my family actually owns and operates both of them. So my family is a part of both the grocery stores in the town. When you walk into the store, it's a complete contrast to what you see here in San Diego. So when you go to something like Jimbo's or Sprouts or Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, this small town store, I would say it more matches a gas station store than it does one of those grocery stores that I just listed. My family's doing such a great job with what they have. When I walked in, they have all these little things set up for the people that come in and shop. It's really, really great. And they work really hard, and they're doing great with their business, and I'm so proud of them. But the stores in the small town, they're mostly filled with highly processed, shelf-stable foods with only a very, very tiny produce section. It seems like they don't have the ability to rely on like a whole natural foods supplier because there's less people in town to buy that food before it goes bad, if that makes sense. They're further away from the big producers, and I'm sure there are many factors, geographical, financial, political, logistically. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff. But between a Whole Foods and one of these stores in town, it's night and day. No matter the reasons, the fact is that the people that live in New Plymouth, Idaho, are at a disadvantage compared to, say, let someone that lives right next door to a Jimbo's health store. So the message that I'm really getting from this episode, the podcast episode that I listened to, and there's a compilation of a bunch of experts on this thing that talk on different aspects of environment in the Doctor's Pharmacy episode that I'll share here. I'll put a link in the description of this episode. But the message that I'm getting from this episode is very hopeful. It gives us the power to understand. If we can set up our environment to match the lifestyle and the person that we want to be, this can be a huge hack to doing something that is extremely challenging, and that is making a lifestyle behavior change that sticks and lasts. That's so hard. So think, what is the type of person that I want to be? What would their day look like? What type of people would they surround themselves with? And then what would they choose to do with their spare time? You can start super small scale and start by setting up your environment at home. You can match your home environment with your goal. If you want to work on mobility, let's say, and you'd like to feel less aches and pains because you're always in pain, you can set up your living room to have a nice soft blanket and cushions on the floor so you can spend more time on the floor. And maybe you could put down foam rollers and soft tissue tools right there in view so that they're ready to be used, quick and easy access. If you want to become stronger, maybe you put a pull-up bar in the doorway that every time you pass through, it triggers you to hang on it or do some pull-ups. Let's say you want to write a book, but you've just been putting it off. Well, maybe set up your office space to have minimal distractions or inspiring content visible or whatever it would take to set up your office space for that project. If you want to become a better parent, you could put books on parenting where you like to hang out most. Or you could put growth type tools that allow you to play with your kids around the house in visible plain sight. You could join online groups or groups around your community that better match the person that you want to be and focus on the activities that match those goals. Notice we didn't say anything about altering diet or increasing exercise. I mean, you definitely could stack your environment to work on those too, but I'm just saying that doesn't have to be a part of it. So maybe that can kind of get your wheels spinning on how to set up your environment, which kind of ties into the next thing that I wanted to share that I just listened to. I just finished reading a book called The Hungry Brain, Outsmarting the Instincts That Make Us Overeat. And this is by Dr. Stephen Guynett. And in the book, there was this part that talked about how making it harder on yourself to snack and harder on yourself to take those small sips, dips, licks, and tastes throughout the day, how that can be so impactful on your weight management goals. So let me share with you a quick 1-minute blurb from chapter 6 of this book. It says, quote, participants of the study with a bowl of Hershey Kiss candies on their desk ate an average of 9 kisses per day. When the participants put that candy bowl in their desk drawer, they ate an average of 6 kisses per day, 3 less kisses in the drawer instead of on the desk. And then those who had to hike all the way across the room for the bowl of Hershey Kisses, those people only ate 4 kisses per day. So 9 on the desk, 6 in the drawer, only 4 when they had to walk across the room to go get it. As once put it, it's not worth the effort for an Eskimo to locate and overeat mangoes. Would we be leaner as a nation if we had to, like the past modern hunter-gatherers tribes did, if we had to hike 3 miles and climb a tree each time we wanted to eat a hamburger and fries or ice cream or pizza? Almost certainly we would still be leaner. Yet our food today is more convenient than it has ever been in human history. And the next part of this book was titled Step Away from the Snacks. It wrote, "The practical implications of avoiding overeating are clear. Don't make it too easy for yourself to eat food throughout the day. Even effort barriers like having to twist open a lid, open a cabinet, peel an orange, or shell nuts can make the difference between eating the right, appropriate amount and overeating. Keeping easy and tempting foods in plain sight, such as opening a bag of chips or a bowl of candy, this creates a situation that is simply too tempting for the parts of our brains that are constantly on the lookout for a good deal. When food was scarce, our brains were programmed to figure out how to get the most amount of energy while using the least amount of energy. Our brains haven't changed that much, but our food environment has done a complete 180. So while we wait for our brains to evolve and catch up, which could be a very long time, we may have to purposefully make it harder for ourselves not to overconsume by stacking with your environment what it looks like in your favor. You want to stack the odds of your food environment in your favor. So when I got home from Costco this week, the last thing that I wanted to do was unload and prep all of the food that I just bought. I already was mad that I spent that much at Costco, and now I had to prep all the food even when I was busy. But you know what? I did it anyway. I washed and cut all the fruit. I put it onto these paper towels so that they could dry, and then I put them into their Tupperware. I then put all the treats and granola bars and the perfect bars, I put them in the back of the fridge, in the back of the cupboards. I put the processed food on the very top shelf of our cabinet where you actually have to use a step stool to access it. And you can do this too. Think about what foods do you want to include more in your diet? Well, just make them in plain sight whenever you put them out. If you put them on the counter, put them in clear, see-through containers with easy access. On the other hand, what foods do you want to start eating less of? Maybe you put those on the top shelf that you can't see in non-see-through containers, where you need to do multiple steps to take it out and access it. Don't tell yourself that you can't have the food. Don't tell yourself, I can't have ice cream, I can't have chocolate, because the toddler part of our brains will take over and it will most likely consume you until your willpower gives in, and then you overconsume and you binge. Everyone goes through it. Not everyone, but lots of people go through it. Maybe put it out in the garage. Maybe do like some of the experts say that I follow, and don't buy it at all. But if you want it, let's say you want some chips, they actually made it a rule where they have to get their clothes on, get in the car, drive to the store, and they can only buy a one single serving bag of those chips. So anytime they want chips, they can have chips. They just have to overcome all of those steps. And usually that obstacle is just enough to let their decision-making brain start to take over and try to take over for the habitual part that tends to kind of guide us when we have those easy snacks late at night when we're not doing anything, we're bored. We can just grab those snacks out of habit, and it kind of takes that obstacle, and they really decide that they don't want the chips that bad. But this common theme of stacking your environment and stacking the things around you and the people around you and the ease of access that will help gently guide you closer to the person that you want to be, and removing from sight, making it harder to do the things that you want less of. This could be a game changer for you. If you've done this, what are some ways that you've stacked your environment? I want to hear about it. What have you found works for you? If you take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your stories, tag me and let me know what you found success with so that I can share it with the rest of the Livin the Dream team. I'd really love to hear from you. Please don't hesitate. And the next thing that I want to share was from a newsletter that I prescribe to. And I follow a lot of content from the author of Atomic Habits, James Clear. I follow a lot of his stuff. It's really good. That book was incredible. And I know a lot of you have already listened to it and read it because I talk to you about it all the time. But if you haven't read Atomic Habits, it's a must read. He was on a podcast with one of my other favorites, Dr. Peter Attia. His podcast is called The Drive. It's a great podcast. It's a little higher level, but if you like that kind of stuff, highly recommend The Drive by Peter Attia. And he talked about his philosophy on the 4 laws of behavior change and how you can build and change habits in your life. I'm also going to share 3 ideas that he offered in his most recent newsletter, which you can subscribe to that for free. It's pretty good. And I wanted to share that because I think that we could all benefit from what he wrote, his ideas. I'll include the links to the full podcast episode and the website where you can subscribe to his newsletter if you're interested. You can find it in the description of this episode. And in this podcast with Dr. Peter Attia, James Clear talked about how we can make our ideas actionable and applicable to our daily lives. The 4 laws of behavior change is how he attempted to do that. So we understand that a habit has 4 steps. A habit has a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. A cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. And in order for us to use those 4 steps to our advantage, we have to do these laws. And the first law to creating behavior change is to make it obvious. Make it obvious. You want the cues to your good habits to be as obvious, available, visible, as easy to see as possible. The easier it is for you to see it, the more likely it is that you're going to act upon it. So you see the pull-up in the doorway, you do the pull-up. You see the soft tissue work on the floor, you get down on the floor. The more obvious you make it, the more likely it is that you're going to act upon it. Okay, obvious. The second law is to make it attractive. The more attractive, appealing, exciting the habit is, the more motivated that you're going to be when you do it. This is about anticipating the desired outcome. So anticipate the desired outcome and kind of associate that with this habit that you're trying to make. The third law is to make it easy. So you have obvious, attractive, and easy. The more easy, convenient, frictionless, and simple a habit is, the more likely the behavior is to be formed. So how can you make it easy? Start small, start slow, make it laughably easy. And the fourth and final law is to make it satisfying. The more satisfying, pleasurable, enjoyable a habit is, the more likely it is that you're going to repeat it in the future. So those 4 laws give you this nice little high-level overview of how to build a habit. Recap, it's obvious, it's attractive, it's easy, it's satisfying. You don't need all 4 of those every single time, but the more that you have those things working for you, the more likely it is that you'll make your habit stick. Now, if you want to kick or break a habit, all you have to do, you just do the inversion of those 4. Instead of making it obvious, you want to make it invisible. So unsubscribe from your emails, reduce exposure to the cue that makes you do the bad habit. If you're deciding to do a food diet, then probably don't follow food bloggers on Instagram or TikTok or watch cake baking shows. That's not going to be good for you. Reduce your exposure to the thing that starts the process of your bad habit. How can you get that invisible? And then rather making it attractive, obviously you associate it with something that's unattractive. Try to think about all the negative consequences that come from this habit that you're trying to break. So make it unattractive. And then rather making it easy, you got to make it difficult. You got to increase the friction. You got to put more steps in between you and that bad habit response. You got to put the M&Ms inside of a Tupperware out in the garage on the top shelf. And then rather than making it satisfying, make it unsatisfying. Layer on some sort of cost or some sort of consequence that reinforces your desired outcome. So those 4 give you a high-level idea of how to break a habit. Make it invisible, unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. And he goes into so much more detail in this podcast episode, so I'll include the link in the description of this episode. But he also released this newsletter that's called 321. He just started it, 321. He gives you 3 short ideas from the week. He gives you 2 quotes, and then he gives you 1 question for us to think about. And in the newsletter, he came up with these 3 ideas, and I really liked it. I'm going to share them with you here. He said, number 1, you have to show up before inspiration will. You have to show up before inspiration will. Number 2, just start. Start slow if you have to. Start small if you have to. Start privately if you have to. Just start. And then number 3, he wrote, a reminder from Atomic Habits. Every action that you take every day is a vote for the type of person that you wish to become. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person that you wish to become. There is no single instance that will transform your beliefs, but As the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. That's pretty awesome. Think about that. Every action that you take every single day is a vote that you're going to cast to be the person that you want to be. And sometimes you cast the vote in the right direction, and sometimes you cast the vote in the wrong direction. But if at the end of the day, after a long period of time, you've casted more votes for the person that you want to be, that's the person that you're going to become. That's your new identity. That's really great stuff from a really smart guy. Thank you, James Clear. 321 newsletter. Number 4. Lastly, I wanted to touch on 4 books that I just finished reading back to back to back. Well, I listened to them all, so I didn't really read, but I got them on audiobook, and they got me fired up. The books were titled Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. And then the next one was called Hooked, Food, Free Will, and How the Food Giants Exploit Our Addictions. Both of those were by Michael Moss. One of them was in 2013, and his sequel came in 2021. And it was such a great combo to read back to back because you can hear from this guy who was extremely passionate about following the food giants and how they're chased to become the financial leaders in their industry, how that has been an all-out assault on our health. We as the consumer are the losers. We're the losers in this game. And he's got decades of research, intelligence, interviews, and insight on exactly how it's happening to us. Really love those 2 books. Also, the next book is titled The Hungry Brain, Outsmarting the Instincts That Make Us Overeat by Dr. Stephen Guina. And then the last book that I read was called The Way That We Eat Now, How the Food Revolution Has Transformed Our Lives, Our Bodies, and Our World by B. Wilson. And they all did a really phenomenal job at breaking down the entire timeline of what happened with our food systems, and the corporations that really took advantage and are still taking advantage of how our addictive and reactive and emotional brains work. Famous phrases like eat less and move more, or get off the couch and just try harder. Well, unsurprisingly, quite often those fail to make a difference when it comes to obesity management. While many inappropriately believe this is due to a lack of intelligence of the consumer, a lack of work ethic, or a lack of willpower, the data actually clearly shows that eating behaviors are made predominantly at a subconscious level, which are heavily influenced by the surrounding food environment of the person. And when they talk about this quote unquote food environment, they describe the physical, economic, social, and cultural surroundings and conditions that, among other things, determine the food's availability, or on the flip side, unavailability, as well as the food's price tag cost, as well as the proximity of the stores or how they get their whole natural foods to an individual or a group of people. But if you just think about it, one of the biggest changes that we've seen in modern food environment is the sharp rise in tasty, cheap, high-calorie foods, typically that are ultra-processed, that are not very filling. Think about this equation, high-calorie plus not very filling. This is a recipe for unchecked increased energy intake, and it doesn't matter who you are. The result is going to be fairly predictable. And yes, there are addictive behaviors in a small subset of people, but we must be better as a food system. These 4 books together paint such an amazing picture as to why we're seeing some of the worst health outcomes our species has ever seen, even though we no longer have to worry about lack of food. Our healthcare system, it makes money off of us being sick. If we're healthy, our healthcare system makes $0. Our food care system, our food system, and food companies, the more food that they sell, the more food we consume. The more money that they make, the more happy that their shareholders are, and the more that they reinforce creating a product that brings in more revenue. It only makes sense. They hire the smartest food scientists that can find what they call the quote unquote bliss point of each food item that uses our human psychology, our human physiology against us, so that we then consume far beyond what we normally would for the adequate sustenance, whatever makes us full. They hire the best marketing teams to market their foods and make them as appealing as possible and really target the most vulnerable of us. And it's getting really crazy. It used to be just adults that they were targeting, and now it's teens. And then I just heard them talking about pre-teens, which they call tweens. They have a customer for life when they get them that young. They have a customer that knows their brand awareness and brand loyalty. And while this is sad to think about, I truly believe that most of the people that are working in the healthcare system, all of my friends, the people that I know, all the people that are working in the food systems, these are wonderful, good-intentioned, caring people who just wanted to do good in this world. But it's the systems that are incentivized financially that are broken. It's the systems. If the systems were incentivized and they were paid to make us healthy, we would be in a completely different spot right now. We would completely have flipped the script. That's why I'm being the change that I want to see with starting this accountability club. And I'll pay a gym membership to someone who achieves their goals. I'm going to incentivize them to chase and achieve health. I'll be there for them, and I'm going to put together a support system that will help guide each member to a long-term lifestyle change. Will it hurt the bottom line of our business? Possibly. Maybe. Most definitely. But the trade-off is worth it to me, and our team and our community deserves that kind of treatment. These books also touch on how we used to eat as a way of connecting with people, as a way of a time to get together. But now we eat on the go. We eat as conveniently as possible, as cheap as possible. We've lost sight of what nourishing our body should be about, what it's been about all along. You are made of the things that you eat. You become whatever it is that you put in your body. If we really sat around and thought on that every time that we put something in our mouth, if we really internalize that, we would be in a different place. What I really got after reading all 4 of these books was a reinforcement of what we already knew. In this country, money is the loudest way to communicate. Where the money goes, that's where our attention flows. Food companies make cheap, convenient, highly palatable, low nutrient dense, ultra-processed foods. Why do they make it? Not because they're evil, most of them, not because all they want is for us to be unhealthy. They make it because we buy it day in and day out. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars a year investing in their products. As soon as they come out with something healthy, a healthy version of a food that was popular, and it flops, well, they are no longer incentivized to continue on that path. Their job is to make the maximum amount of money as much as possible for their shareholders and their companies. Nothing is going to change until we vote with our dollars. Will that ever happen if all of us end up taking our money and instead of spending it on processed food, we spend it on whole natural foods? I mean, I sure hope it does, but as of now, there's not a single trend showing that that's going to happen. But every dollar we spend is casting a vote for how we want our world to look like. Every time you grab a Snickers, every time you neglect the organic, cheaper version, that is you voting for those companies to continue to pump out those products. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever buy a Snickers. I buy a Snickers every once in a while as a treat. I buy processed food all the time. But what I'm saying is it's going to take this huge mindset shift. We can't just look at food with the dollar face value that it says on the price tag. If we look and see this ready-to-bake pizza is $5, while these 2 avocados are $6, well, we actually have to not do the face value math. We have to take a deeper look. We have to think about our hospital bills for the last 10 years of our lives. We have to think about all the money that we are going to lose constantly being sick and calling sick into work. We have to look at the total health cost of us being overweight, undernourished, unhappy, weak immune, cognitively declined, and we have to see our health as an early investment. So maybe we cast 80% of the votes towards the foods that go towards our health goals and 20% of our dollar votes towards foods that fill our other buckets of health and are more treat-based. We have to see our health as an early investment. Read one of these books or read all 4. The best way for us to really see this bigger picture is to just keep educating ourselves. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to the choir right now. If you're listening to this, it's because you all are the ones that are doing this. You're being lifelong learners and doing your best to live your own dream life. It's awesome. So share with the people in your lives so that they can vote with their dollars. Investing early so that we don't have to pay the real costs later in life. If money talks the loudest, it's our job not to be so tunnel visioned and only see the surface level. Education and then applied knowledge and a deeper level of understanding is how I think that we're going to eventually get this right. We're going to get this right. We're eventually going to get there. I know we will. I just hope that I see it in my lifetime. Check out these books, Salt, Sugar, Fat, Hooked, Michael Moss. We got The Hungry Brain and The Way That We Eat Now. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from poet Mary Oliver. May I be the tiniest nail in the house of the universe. Tiny, but useful. And that's it, my friends, for this week's episode. Each week, we will focus on sharing information that will help you with your health, fitness, and wellness journey. Share the knowledge that you gain with your friends and family and hold each other accountable. If you enjoyed this content, it would help a ton if you could post on your social media stories a screenshot of this episode with one takeaway that you learned and make sure that you tag me and share your journey. Tag at Livin the Dream _podcast or at Coach Damien _SD. And let us know how this episode benefited you. Let us know what we missed. Let us know what we got wrong. Tell us how you were able to stack your environment or how you used the 4 laws of behavior change or how you felt about the topic of our food system. Message us if you have any suggestions or tips that would help your Livin the Dream team that we can discuss on future episodes. I will be right here with you working on making us stronger, happier, and healthier humans. Until next time, friends, keep living the dream.